Hey, in this video today I'm going to compare the Unbreakable trilogy from M. Night Shyamalan to the Taken trilogy with Liam Neeson. First of all, we look at highest score for each franchise. In the case of the Unbreakable franchise, the middle film in the trilogy, Split, has the highest score of 78%. Then when you look at Taken, that first movie has the highest score of only 60%, so Unbreakable wins this one. Then when you look at lowest score for each franchise, Unbreakable is going to win again, because while Glass is the lowest rated movie, it has a 37%. That's higher than the score for Taken Free, which is only a 13%. Then when you look at average score, Unbreakable wins again because it has an average of 61, whereas Taken only has an average of 31. Then when we look at gap between lowest and highest score, in the case of Taken, lowest score is 13, highest score is 60, so gap of 47. When you look at Unbreakable, the lowest score is 37, highest score is 78, so you have a gap of 41, meaning the gap's a bit smaller for Unbreakable, so it wins again, meaning that Unbreakable is going to win no matter what. But let's look at my personal opinion. I think that the first Unbreakable is a really good movie, a different kind of comic book movie that's more subtle, where you have this guy, David Dunn, who is able to survive these things that a normal person would not be able to. And you have this guy played by Samuel L. Jackson, who's really into comic books. He takes them seriously, thinks they're actual history, and then there's a reveal in the third act about what's really going on with him, that he's actually the bad guy, so he's taken away, he's arrested. Then you get to Split, and it definitely does something different, goes in a different direction, where David Dunn only shows up in the post-credit scene. This movie's about a guy played by James McAvoy who is really damaged. He has DID, dissociative identity disorder. You have all these different personalities that don't think the same way, that have different voices, different mannerisms, different ages, actually. And then there's this monstrous identity, this beast that shows up in the third act. Obviously, this movie's not at all trying to be realistic, so it's not trying to portray DID in an accurate way. It's a comic book movie, and so you have comic book logic in this movie, not real world logic. I think the movie works. James McAvoy gives a great performance. He's really interesting to watch. But then I think Glass was a disappointing conclusion to the trilogy. The way it wrapped up David Dunn's story, I don't think did the character justice. It's not what people wanted coming out of that first movie. So that's unfortunate. But I think Taken is one of these examples of a franchise that should never have been a franchise. As much as I don't like Glass, I think Unbreakable had more of a strong foundation for a trilogy. You could see coming out of the first film why we should do more movies. It was more obvious where you go next, whereas of Taken, fundamentally speaking, it's one of these premises that just does not lend itself to more stories, does not lend itself to a trilogy, to a franchise. Why is that? Well, because when you have the same thing happening over and over again to this one family where someone's taken, we're just straining too much credibility, because it's like, really, this is happening again? This is just getting ridiculous. Admittedly, I like that when we get to Taken Free, the daughter is so unfazed at that point. She's like, oh yeah, of course it's happening again. I don't care anymore. This is literally just commonplace for my family. But I mean, along with Jaws, Taken is a great example of a studio not taking the time to ask themselves, wait a minute, we can make more movies, but should we make more movies? Is this a premise that actually lends itself to a franchise, or does it not lend itself to a franchise? You have the same problem with Jaws. When you have shark attacks just keep happening again and again at the same place or to the same characters, you're just straining too much credibility, because it's like, really? The same family just going through this again and again? This is ridiculous. Also, wow, when you get to Taken Free, yikes, the action is bad. It's seriously weak. It's pretty astounding to me, like, how bad the action really is in Taken Free. Why do I say that? Well, because you have so many different shots, so much quick cut editing, close-ups, shaky cam, so you can't actually follow the action, you can't make out what's going on. It's frankly disorienting to watch because the camera just keeps zooming in. We go from one shot to the next shot every 2 seconds. There's so much shaky cam, and so it's just not fun anymore. Whereas in the case of Unbreakable, and I think that even the third movie has good elements in it, even if the movie as a whole doesn't actually work. So this one's pretty easy for me. There's not much of a debate at all in my mind. Yeah, obviously Unbreakable's better, because there actually was a solid foundation there to build a trilogy on, whereas of Taken, you just didn't have that foundation. So you have just sequels that are trying to draw more out of this premise than what's really there. They're trying to just stretch everything out unnecessarily, when doing so doesn't actually make for good movies. I mean, Taken 2, okay, sure, there are good things about it, but it's certainly not as good as the first one. You can feel them starting to just stretch things out unnecessarily. That'll be it for now, though.